Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. As I speak to farmers from around the U.S. and beyond, I am always interested in where they are garnering support from. Farmers enter into farming from all different backgrounds. Some need help securing land, some need financial support, some need marketing and accounting support, and some need help with farming skills, to name just a few things. And we would assume that those support systems would be available. Well, that is not always the case. However, in some areas, that is definitely the case, and the level of support for farmers and the agricultural industry is very present, active, and constantly innovating ways to support and help the farming community. Berkshire Agricultural Ventures is one of those nonprofit companies that is doing just that. They are on a mission to support the development and viability of local farms and food businesses in order to build a thriving and equitable local food economy in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. And they do this by providing flexible and innovative financial and technical resources to farmers and local food businesses. In this podcast episode, you will meet the Executive Director of Berkshire Ag Ventures, Rebecca Busansky, and Ben Crockett, Program Manager for their Climate Smart Ag program. Rebecca's past work focused on helping local farms thrive and increasing food access. Before leading Berkshire Ag Ventures, Rebecca led efforts to build an innovative community investment vehicle that provided financing and technical assistance to farm and local food entrepreneurs in Western Massachusetts. She also managed the Mass Food Trust Program since its inception in 2018, which provides financing to increase the availability of affordable, healthy food in underserved communities across the Commonwealth. Rebecca works hard to understand the needs of today's farmers and leads her nonprofit to deliver products and services to meet and exceed those needs. Ben Crockett works diligently with local farmers to help them understand and manage their soil, which is the most important ingredient in farming. He is also focused on helping them manage and plan for changing climate demands, which is of top of mind for many farmers today. Berkshire Ag Ventures should be a model employed by every U.S. county. First, we need to understand, recognize, and appreciate the importance of farmers to our local and regional food systems. And then we need to figure out how to best support their success. It's in all of our best interests to do that. This is Jen Ross, your Agritourist podcast host. Enjoy my conversation with Rebecca and Ben. My conversation with Rebecca and Ben took place a few weeks prior to the inauguration. Just a note that some of the programs that we discussed may be impacted by the government changes that are taking place. Happy New Year. I know, thank you for doing this in early January. I figured let's get it done because we know what happens the second week in January. Everything blows up and then we get sucked back into all the craziness of work. So why don't you, each of you, I know, Rebecca, we've spoken once in the past on the phone, but for the purpose of this, why don't each of you just give me a little bit about your backgrounds? Then I'd like to talk a little bit about the Berkshires in general, kind of this, state of what's going on with food and farming and all the things that kind of impact your organization. And then I'd like to do a deep dive into the organization because I think what you're doing is very unique, very meaningful, and is having a tremendous impact from what I can see. So I want to learn more about that. So whoever wants to go first.
I'll leave it to you, Rebecca. Oh, really? Thanks, Ben. Okay. So I'm Rebecca Busansky. I'm the executive director of Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, and I've been with BAV, as it's known fondly, for about a year and a half. And I come out of a world of farm and food financing and community investing and using technical assistance as a tool, really kind of business consulting to really help farmers grow and thrive. I worked in the what's known as the Pioneer Valley or the Connecticut up and down the Connecticut River of Massachusetts, that valley area, and now kind of moved over to this Berkshire-Taconic region. BAV serves Berkshire County, Mass, as well as Litchfield County, Connecticut, and Columbia and Dutchess County, New York, what's known as sort of roughly the Berkshire-Taconics. That does have its sort of is really its own region in a lot of ways. For example, almost half of the farmers in in this region are livestock farmers. So we do a lot around livestock farming, for example. So yeah, that's a little bit
What
more.
I just have one question for you. What drew you to this type of industry, this world? Like, what was it that
Yeah,
attracted you personally, even that one, because, there's a lot of other things. You have a tremendous amount of skills and you've pretty much, from your background that I read, you're very attracted to this, this type of industry and a very entrepreneurial, that has a very
yeah.
entrepreneurial flavor to it.
Yeah. Well, I lived in New York City for a lot of my adult life before moving to Western Mass 14 years ago. And in New York City, I did community economic development work, and that looks very different. That really looked like affordable housing and criminal justice and workforce development. And during that time, I also started with a neighbor, one of the first CSAs in our neighborhood in Brooklyn, back hard to imagine now, maybe, but when there really weren't very many. Turns out it was also the first mixed income CSA. We took food stamps. We were the first CSA in New York City. We didn't know it at the time, but we had it paired with a farmer, and that was really interested in doing that as well. So food access work was always really important to me, and local food was really important to me, and being able to source local food. And so when we moved to Western Mass, I really looked around and thought, like, what are the sort of what's economic development, community economic development look like here? And it felt like food access, agriculture were really important pieces of it. And then I got slotted into the work that I did at, kind of bumbled into the work I did at the PV Grows Investment Fund. And that, took up many years and really developed some expertise in that before coming over to BAV to do the work
Excellent.
that we do here.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Perfect. Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, thank you. I'm originally from Western Maine, right along the New Hampshire border, kind of out in the sticks, as we'd call it, and uh, went to University of Vermont and really fell in love with plants and ended up getting my degree in horticulture and landscape design. While I was wrapping up that program, I realized what I really wanted to do was dive headfirst into farming and started a CSA with a friend at her parents' farm in central Vermont. And from there, took on a number of different agriculture jobs. You worked at one of the people you previously interviewed, Scott Farm, many years ago. Had my hand in apples
Oh,
for a
wow.
while. Worked. I ran a small micro dairy focused on raw milk for many years in southeastern Vermont. And over time, and just as life kind of turns on and things change, I got really engaged with the education and what we would call like agricultural service provider world, and more trying to provide learning and really what Rebecca mentioned earlier, like technical support for farmers. So trying to figure out the answers to the trickier questions that usually come up when you're growing, whether they're business related or kind of where I focus more at the actual growing practices. Um, I had been managing a farm for a nonprofit before starting with BAV, and while I was managing that farm, I got involved with this program called the Climate Adaptation Fellowship, which is now called the Climate Adaptation and Mitigation Fellowship. But the whole idea was to pair farm operators with service providers and basically do an analysis of the farm, what the potential risks to the farm are related to climate change, and then come up with a strategy and a plan for addressing those risks, adapting new management practices, and then um, identifying funding if need be to adopt those practices on the farm. And that's kind of what led me to working with Bev is taking that process and that learning of my farm experience and working kind of on both sides of the table as a farmer and a service provider to, I wanted to work with more farmers to help them kind of identify their risk, troubleshoot the things that could really put their agricultural businesses at risk. So that's mostly like what brought me to working with Bev and what excited me about the work at Bev.
And that's pretty unique that, that you're able to do that because, and that these farmers have you as a resource to do something like that. Because I know here, and I've talked to Rebecca about this when we had Cornell Cooperative, but for some reason, whenever we reached out, we weren't getting that type of support. And it was like a phone conversation when you're like, no, you have to come see, you have to. And it was just, I don't know, we did not get the level of support that I guess I had. I don't want to say expected, that's a terrible word, but I guess expected because I thought the community, would be supporting each other on a different level. So
totally.
I'm very impressed, with many of the people I've interviewed in your region about the dedication to really the success of farmers and people in agriculture. So it's pretty impressive. So tell me about the state of the union as far as farming and agriculture in the Berkshires. Like what is happening?
Yeah.
What's happening? What are some of, what are the observations? What are the challenges? Like, at a high level, what are you seeing happening?
Well, I think, I'll just start off, but I think really but Ben's work really speaks to a lot of what we're seeing happening in this region. But I do think kind of in kind of a broader sense, I think we're at a moment in time where we're in the process of coming out of the pandemic, and we saw a lot of farmers shifting the way that they do business. So maybe they served restaurants and they're gun shy about going back to restaurants. And I have no hard data on this, is just kind of more anecdotally. So there's definitely some like business shifts that happen. I think there was really a huge and, really important shift to kind of community food. So like getting local farming, local food to local folks. And there was ARPA funds, et cetera, that backed that up. And I think we are seeing already even a real kind of shift in the sort of federal funding sources. And I think we can really expect moving forward that we're going to see even more shifting or holdups or holding back, waiting for a new farm bill, for example, is a good example that really holds up. We right now work with, we just started this dairy TA cohort where we're working with a cohort of 8 dairy farmers on business assistance, grant writing support, succession planning, climate change, adaptation and mitigation, all these kind of different areas. And we're going to be working with them over the course of 2 years. Well, that's on hold. Any future cohort money is on hold right now until a new farm bill is signed. We were the last ones in, basically. We're the last round of grant funding for that program. So that's kind of an example of, I think, what we're going to be seeing more and more. And that's gonna shift things again for farmers. Farmers really geared up, I think, to serve their local communities, and now they're gonna have to like keep pivoting. And then I think just the climate work that Ben does really speaks to one of the biggest changes. So I'll let Ben answer that part of it.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I have anything deep to say other than climate is going to affect farmers at every level, at every scale, every type of production. So I think it's just a lot of learning and trying to build a community that is talking to each other, because I think every farm is taking on different challenges and every farm can learn from the successes and failures of other farmers. So that's definitely something I've keyed into and always want to lean into with any of our work, is just understanding that connectivity of farmers to farmers, especially because those networks are so important for like quickly getting out what are effective tools, what are effective management strategies. I think other pressures are kind of like nothing new in a sense. I mean, as Rebecca alluded to, I think the pandemic shifted a lot of things and created some opportunities and changed the landscape of what was possible for the business. But as you're probably aware, Jennifer, New England in particular, and especially in our particular service region, land access, the cost of land,
Mhm.
the transition of land, either between generations or from agricultural use to non-agricultural uses is I don't know if I go as far as to say it's a threat. I mean, I think it could be perceived that way, but I think especially that it creates a new level of challenge for this generation of farmers that their predecessors haven't faced, and it's even harder to get started if you aren't already in a farm family, and the land relationships that people enter into to access land are very different than they were 50 years ago, and we just see that repeatedly with all kinds of scales and types of clients we work with, because a grazing lease looks different than managing your own hay farm, or even interfamily leasing. A younger generation is taking over maybe part of the farm, but there's not a full family transition plan, or there's someone that has means, has bought a large farm. They don't know anything about farming. They're trying to find someone to manage the farm. Like, there's just these relationships, I think, are kind of the frontier of creating, long lasting and resilient impacts, especially when we talk about climate change and a lot of the strategies that we need to take regionally to adapt to climate change. If you don't have secure land tenureship, a lot of these adaptations aren't going to stick. And we really need to be, for climate adaptation anyways, and the stuff that I focus on is thinking 20, 50-year scale. We can't, it's not just like, how do we get through this cropping season? It's like, how do we get your business to be viable and know that you have land tenureship so you can get through, a whole generation of growing and beyond. So I think that is probably one of the underlying common themes, regardless of the type of farm in our region.
Well, I was just going to kind of build off of what Ben was saying, because I think that's really important. I think farmland access is a major issue. We are, losing acreage every year to housing pressures, solar fields. Massachusetts, for example, is one of the highest costs of land in the country. So we know that those pressures are really real. And I think that each state that, we sit in this little tri-state, like we have this little bird's eye view of this tri-state area, because we serve a little part of 3 different states. And it's really interesting to see how each state is really working, and I think in some creative and innovative ways to really deal with the farmland access issues. And everyone agrees that the best thing you can do to keep farmland in production is to keep farmers farming on the land. And that's exactly what that's kind of sits squarely in that space, where we're providing real wraparound services to help keep farmers farming on their land. And I think that's a really important role that we play in this whole issue.
To your point.
Oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
Just one question on what Rebecca said.
Please.
So to your point, Rebecca, about you are in a unique position. You're seeing states doing different things. And I'm not trying to point out a specific state, but is there anything unique that you're seeing that is, making a dent in this, that is something different and that's helping with this land access?
I think we're seeing, in all cases, we're seeing it just start to ramp up. So I can't say that it's made a dent yet, but I think that what Massachusetts is doing around farmland access, they did a big report on farmland access, which was really outstanding. They just hired a farmland access coordinator. They're kind of ramping up to kind of get partners to work on this issue, and from a lot of different perspectives. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but it's coming, and it's coming soon. And I think that's exciting. I think, what Connecticut won a big contract for diversity, equity, inclusion work to get more farmers of color onto land. And they've been through a big 2-year process of looking at their DEI practices and how to change those. And they've now got, I think it's at UConn, they have a person situated to really teach a lot of like beginning farmer classes, which is great. And they're going to actually, this funding source that they have, this federal funding source, is actually going to allow them to give out some money to help new farmers kind of buy, it won't cover the cost. And then on the New York side too is they're also gearing up for a grant program that's going to actually be some funding to help farmers, new farmers and farmers of color in particular, transition to land, and then eventually maybe just pay for a little bit of funding to pay for a little bit of the land. I mean, it's not going to be huge, but that's really important. The transition is really a costly and timely process. And then there's the purchase of land, which is immensely costly. So each state is actually kind of doing different things, but really interesting stuff. And I think we're going to see that as that rolls out in the next year. It's going to be interesting to watch it happen.
Ben, I know you wanted to say something, but I just want to ask one other question. Are you seeing right now people wanting to farm? And what demographics are you seeing? Because I'm a little older and I obviously have an interest in getting back into this, but what are you seeing right now, especially post-COVID? Because COVID was this weird thing in the middle that drove interesting change and, peaks and valleys and things. But then all of a sudden, I know things are not that they're returning to, there's no normal, but we're kind of post-COVID now. So what are we seeing as far as, do people want to farm? Do they want to do this?
I mean, I'm coming off of December being a lot of conferences and things like that this time of year. And I mean, I don't see any slowdown in interest.
That's good.
I think they're all generations.
That excites me.
Yeah,
when I hear that.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I just thinking of the New England Veg and Fruit Conference. It's just more people than I've ever seen there, all walks of life, all generations. And I think it's more when you zoom into our region, I think the demographics, I actually don't know if I could really wrap my hands around it. I mean, I feel like we work with younger clients, we work with older clients, we work with second or third career clients. I don't know if there is a clear delineation. I don't know, Rebecca, if you have a better sense of it.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think what we see around what Multicultural Bridge is doing in the Berkshires with the Solidarity Acres, that's kind of an emerging farmer. Some people are farming for their own to grow their own culturally appropriate foods. And some people are more kind of emerging and evolving farmers. I think we see it at Soulfire Farm which is another kind of beginning farmer training program for people of color. I think we see it. I just think again, anecdotally, the people that we know that are farming on a small parcel of land, but they can't afford to own their land and trying to figure out how to make it work. I think, I think the interest is there. I think it's a passion. I think farming is, one of those careers that's just is a passion. And when you're hooked, you're sort of hooked. But I think the harder part is figuring out how to really make it into really find that land. And as Ben said, that secure land is essential. It's essential in so many ways, not just if you're improving the soil, you can't take that with you. If you're moving your climate change mitigation, you can't take that with you. But in addition, just to be able to get a grant or a loan, you have to have secure land tenure. That's really,
or someone who's willing to say that this tenureship is secure, which is a whole other relationship to manage. Yeah. And the only other thing I'd add, it's kind of related to all that maybe is a shift, is that I think Rebecca alluded to it and just want to emphasize is that I don't think you find people that are just farmers anymore. Looking at what is a viable farm business has changed a lot. And there are still, I would say, generationally, farms that we're a dairy farm or we're a produce farm, that still exists. But I think there's just as many or more farmers starting out that are saying, we provide a service, we provide some level of agritourism, we provide some other community service that is beyond just growing the food. So I think that has increased because, again, as Rebecca is saying, the opportunities for success as a business have changed a little bit, and they're morphing it, and that crunch on land sometimes means you can only squeeze so many carrots out of an acre, kind of, right? But what you do with those carrots and what those carrots mean to the community, that other value can be added there, and that relates to some of the processing work we get involved with too, which is a whole other piece of it. But
right. And I also think that also connects just to off-farm jobs, which you're just seeing growing and growing. I think the recent Ag Census put it at like 80% of farmers have some off-farm job. So that could just be, one member of a, partnership. It doesn't have to mean that necessarily that both of you are working off-farm, but that's been there's some other financial resources needed to make it work. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. That's a great point. And that's what I'm seeing in my interviews. And across the US, even, internationally, people
Yeah.
are being creative. Income is coming from different sources, but the focus is still on the essence of what they're trying to do. It is around connecting people to food,
Yeah.
nutrition, the soil, the importance of the soil. So it's nice to see that underlying theme still there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about BAV. What is it? What do you do? What kind of impact are you having on your clients? So whoever wants to take that, go ahead.
Want me to go for it, Ben?
I feel like you've got the overarching
And also,
view, probably.
one thing I want to also bring out here is this organization unique? Because I have to say, I have not, I've talked to a lot of people and I'm seeing like I see organizations through universities, like the extensions doing related stuff, I'll call it, because I don't, but I don't see this type of organization all the time. So that's my take. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Okay. Yeah, great. Well, I'll just start. So, BAV really provides this, what I always say is kind of provides the scaffolding that farmers need to succeed. So, and we do that in a number of ways. So we provide low interest loans. They're very relationship based. We do a lot of loan readiness with farmers. There's a whole kind of educational component in lending to farmers. We do what's called non-traditional financing. So they can't get the money from the bank or Farm Credit East or Farm Service Agency. So they, come to BAV for some financing that could be about equipment or infrastructure, working capital, growing their business. And then we do just a lot of scaffolding around that, which really looks like technical assistance, which is sort of business consulting service. It could be on the ground, kind of help with the farm, some aspect of your farm, like what Ben was talking about earlier. But the idea really being to help you kind of understand where your business is at, the farm business is at, how you're making money, where you're not making money, how it can become more profitable. If it's a grant that you want to go for, then we can partner a farm with a grant writer. But that takes some business planning too, right? Because you just don't want to throw your application into the wind. You want to make sure it's going to, if you get the grant funds, it's going to have an impact. A lot of the grant funding since the pandemic is become reimbursable grants. So you have to pay up, the farmer has to pay up front and then they get paid back when it's done. And for a lot of farmers, that's just not feasible. So we do really short-term bridge financing. So we can go in and we can lend them the money to get the project done. And when they get paid back, then they pay us back, which can be really, I think has been really helpful to farmers. And then we specialize in 3 areas. So we have our climate change work that Ben leads and was talking about. We have a whole local meat processing program that's led by Jake Levin, and that's really around a report that we issued in 2020 that talked about what are the major obstacles for our livestock farmers. Again, given that we have so many in the Berkshire-Taconic region, and one of the main obstacles that popped up was really lack of slots at local meat processing facilities. So, the meat processing industry is really run by these 3 or 4 big guys who really run the show for the country and are, having a lot of negative impacts on our, in our health and nutrition in lots of different ways, and climate, et cetera. And so really, we were really leaning into what are our local meat processing facilities doing? And if they don't have enough slots, how can we help them to bring in more animals? How can we help them? So we've done long-term technical assistance engagements with a number of them. That looks like 18 months, which actually, to your question, Jen, is something I've never seen before. So, and I feel very proud of, even though it started before me, because it really helped these meat processing plants, really understand. So, what's holding us back from opening up more slots, bringing more in? Is it health and safety issues? Is it more equipment? Is it infrastructure? Is it expanding our business? Do we need a loan? Do we need a grant? And we really kind of held their hand and helped them through that process to try and really increase the throughput with meat processing. And we've really looked up and down the whole meat processing value chain. So really looking at what does aggregation look like? What does transportation look like? We have a whole project looking at additional value added meat products, kind of what Ben was alluding to earlier. But so bone broth, pet treats, like where are the opportunities for our livestock farmers to use those parts of the animal that aren't getting sold at the farmer's market or at a local grocery store or co-op, and so, or from a local meat CSA. So how are they able to make more money off of those other parts that we typically don't use? So really been just kind of working on that for really about 3 years now. And then our third strategic area is our market match fund. So we fundraise and provide a market match, farmers market matching dollars for SNAP users. So for low-income shoppers, they go to the farmers market, we add an additional $30 onto their food stamps and they can use that any kind of SNAP product. So anything that SNAP is eligible for. So that means not just fruits and vegetables, but dairy, meat, eggs, honey. There's just a wider range of SNAP, eligible products. So it really expands. We serve 10 Berkshire area farmers market, and it really expands low-income shoppers' ability to be able to buy and shop at the farmers markets. And we support the farmers markets during the growing seasons, but we also do the winter farmers markets in Berkshire County as well, which is, I think, really important. So that one is really just like a triple win. That's been incredible. So we really see obviously how it supports people with food stamps. It's a huge economic development tool. It brings in a lot of dollars for our farmers. It means that folks are shopping. They don't have to discount what they're selling. They don't have to give it away for free. They're actually able to sell at like real market value. And it supports our farmers markets because a lot of them were sinking. They just weren't really able to do that kind of fundraising. You're working 1 or 2 days a week. You're wearing 5 hats, whatever. And I always say, and it gives me goosebumps, but like Pittsfield to me is the best example, the Pittsfield Farmers Market, which is one of our highest transaction farmers markets in Berkshire County. And it's run by this great organization, Roots Rising, who we love and have a lot of respect for.
I've heard of them, yes.
And they were, before we started our market match program, we're going into our 4th year, they were only able to offer SNAP matching for the first 2 hours of every market. So that meant that someone on food stamps had to show up in the first 2 hours, get in line, and after 2 hours, they ran out of money. And they did that because they wanted to stretch it through the whole season. I mean, they had a good reason. They didn't have enough money, and that was their solution. But it also meant that obviously, it was a lot of pressure on someone to show up first thing on a Saturday morning. It meant that maybe if they didn't show up, they weren't going to get it. And now, thanks to BAV's Market Match program, they're able to offer SNAP matching all day, every day through the entire season, just to so that's like a really impactful program for our farmers markets and our farmers and folks on food stamps. So, and
you said you fundraise for that, or do you get grant? Like, so what does that mean?
Well, I mean, BAV is a nonprofit, so we fundraise a lot in general. We have a diversified funding stream like most healthy nonprofits have, which looks like, federal and state grants and donors and foundations and corporations. And then we do kind of a very focused fundraising for market match. We raise we put out about $140,000 per year to cover the SNAP matching, this additional $30 at these 10 area markets. And that, we get a really great response, and that really looks like foundations, businesses, local businesses. I shouldn't even say corporations, local businesses, and individuals who really want to really see that through and see that happen. And some people might think of it as sort of an additional burden or an unusual thing for a nonprofit, a small nonprofit to do, but we see it as an essential. Again, it's really supporting those 3 groups that I just talked about. Really, really important. not to digress too much, but Massachusetts has the Healthy Incentives Program, which provides additional dollars for folks on food stamps, but only for fruits and vegetables. And it's a fantastic program. It's been around for 7 years. It's been a game changer. It's been a huge economic development boon for farmers, obviously huge for folks on food stamps, and really successful. And this year, in a really a strange blip, in the budget, they had 15 million approved for HIP. They need 25 million to fully fund it for the year. And usually they do an emergency kind of short-term kind of spending gap bill that makes up that other 10 million. But anyway, I won't even go into those details, but for whatever reason, they cut the SNAP matching. Instead of being $40 to $80 based on family size, they cut it back to $20, and they started at that on December 1st. So we ran a quick, just emergency campaign to try and fundraise $20,000 to add additional money to our market match fund for fruit and vegetable growers to get through the winter, in the hopes that this will be resolved, what we've been hearing but from our local elected officials, to hopefully get this resolved. They will hopefully have this resolved by the spring. So we couldn't make up the whole difference. We knew that, but we are adding now another additional $20 onto that market match at these winter farmers markets, because we know, again, that during the pandemic and since HIP began, that farmers have really began to focus a certain amount of their market sales on selling to, through HIP, through market match, through community food distributions that have been going on. And we knew that this was going to be a really big hit to our farmers, without a doubt, really, really big hit for low-income shoppers. And, so we did that, and we were successful, and we raised $20,000 in the month of November for that. So the community response, there's no question, whatever happens in the next 4 years, like doubling down on our community coming together is going to be really essential. It's going to be essential to support our farmers, and essential to support local food, and then just really essential to support each other. So,
and I think whether it's the next 4 years or however long, I think that's important for us to do anyway.
Yeah.
So it might just be forcing it a little bit sooner.
Yeah,
So
it's a very good
really
point.
important.
Yep.
So I want to just take this down to, okay, so I'm an interested farmer, and because you have the one interesting thing about your area is that there are several organizations that are doing many amazing things to help people interested in getting into farming food, So if I'm, an experienced farmer coming from somewhere else, need to get to understand the area, don't have land yet, and, I want to grow vegetables and flowers, let's say, who should I be talking to? Like, who would that person go to? Navigate me through this world. Like, would I be coming to you first? I know there's Berkshire Grown, who does some amazing things as well, and they have a ton of programs. I spoke to Margaret, great conversation. You guys are all doing some amazing things. So just like, I just want to take it down to that elementary level is, how do I navigate all this? Because, I went onto your website and tremendous information, but people get overwhelmed and then they get paralyzed,
Yeah.
So what do I do? Make a phone call? What would I do?
I think I can speak to this a little bit more, just because, myself and my coworkers, we do a lot of, the intake or what you're describing, that kind of first phone call. And really, I would say start anywhere, anywhere that seems like the right direction is a great place to start, because I think what's, not on the website or not always clear to everyone externally is that, like, as organizations, Berkshire Grown's a great example. Like, we're communicating, we're talking, we're trying to strategize together. Like, okay, what are you focused on? Here's where we can, apply our efforts and our energy. If you're doing that, we can help with this. And that doesn't just go between nonprofits. I mean, especially in my role, I'm working with Extension. I'm working with national nonprofits like American Farmland Trust. I'm working with researchers. I'm working with technology companies to learn more about their soil moisture sensing and products, and how those might help farmers, right? So I think it's more understanding that there's a big web, and wherever you're comfortable and you're able to start building those relationships, that's the best place to start. Because really, I mean, it's a little cliche sometimes, but it really is like relationship based. I mean, I think especially in agriculture, everything is heavily relationship based, whether it's part of growing or part of the business or part of marketing. Um, there are a lot of amazing people doing a lot of amazing work, and it's really just I think sometimes if you're trying to narrow down, it's identifying what is your biggest question or what is your biggest problem. So, if land access is the biggest sticking point for where you are in your farm business development, you could still reach out to us. And not that we're land access specialists, but we pride ourselves on trying to have a really hefty Rolodex that people are like, oh, okay, based on your situation, like here's where these are good places to start, and these are people we've seen that have helped other farmers in your situation or other businesses in your situation. So I'd say that's the easy version, is just like find the place that makes sense or is your biggest sticking point. And you're like, I'm really trying to answer land access. Great, let's work on that. Or, I think for some of businesses that are a little more mature, they're trying to expand or develop or really solidify their niche in the market. Then we start getting into enterprise analysis, grant writing, developing, more efficient systems on the farm, and start getting a little bit more technical and specific about what their business needs to thrive. And we have, different teams that we want to build around those farmers to support them in those questions. So, it really depends on where you're at. And there's a slew of organizations, and we all have different visions and approaches to the problems that farmers run into. And I think the thing that's always drawn me to BAV and like still energizes me to this day is just like the idea of business viability, because having farmed and trying to run a business, you see how much is involved in that. And usually farmers are wearing like 25 hats because they have to do it all. It's all DIY. So if we can provide even just part-time, build out their team to address whatever that challenge is that season or in that stage of their business development, I think it takes many forms, whether it's processing or access to markets or figuring out, how to better serve their customer base. Like that's where I really think that we can shine, is that we can help build those teams and really build out that network around the farmer that to address whatever problem they're focused on.
So I have to ask you, Ben, what's any unique calls that you've gotten? Anything that kind of that was like, wow, that's something to think about?
I think I've had the pleasure of working with a farmer actually outside of our region, but as part of the Climate Fellowship. And I brought this up at an event we had in September. We were trying to price out the difference between getting orchard frost protection based on these blowers, propane systems, or renting a helicopter service to fly around the orchard. And like that was it's just a really interesting way to start thinking about kind of what climate resiliency looks like. Because again, I think a lot of these problems, I wouldn't say are completely novel, but the way that we need to manage them in the Northeast might be new or different. Whereas flying a helicopter around an orchard might be a little more common in like Pennsylvania or these bigger fruit growing regions like Oregon and Washington. But yeah, it's drones, just those kind of things. Yeah, drones are coming up. Yeah,
we used a drone. There was a company that was trying to test out a service of using drones to spray. So we would spray this nutrition spray, and we were using, we were testing out this whole thing. The thing was amazing, but there were complications to it, but we were, it was interesting because we were helping them work that out, and they were kind of giving us a free service. And boy, did it save a lot of manpower, like with this. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was like this, it was a big drone, but it was the coolest thing. And we got a friend of mine, the guy who does the media, came and did a whole video on it. And it was really cool. But yeah, you got to look into that stuff.
Yeah, I'll just kind of piggyback on what Ben was saying, because I think, and what you were saying, Jen, really, which is there are a lot of really good support organizations out there for farmers and new beginning all the way through to more seasoned or multi-generational farmers. And we haven't done, I think it's hard to really make it clear where to start. And the point is really, to Ben's point, is like, reach out, whether it's us through our, we have a contact form on our website, or grab an email, that's a great place to start. And even if we're not the right place, Land for Good, an organization that serves New England, has a great farmland finder. So are you looking for farmland, or do you have farmland already and you're really looking to kind of get started? Well, the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources runs a couple great beginning farmer courses every winter, for example. Or, anyway, there's many different ways. There's, I wouldn't say there's a lot of common challenges and a common steps, and yet everyone is also at the same time unique to some degree. And so I think it's really incumbent upon all of us ag service providers to make those connections. We do a lot of connecting. There's just to really make it work. And we work closely with a lot of partners, as one person said to me, no silos, no solos.
Exactly.
It is like together we really are building our food shed and strengthening our local food system. And so we will connect.
That's important. That's important.
Yeah.
Hopefully that message resonates with, everyone you're working with, because it's, you need to work together. Definitely. So you guys were part of a New England Food Vision Initiative. I know there was something on your website about that. That was last year. What was it, last year? Or?
So there's been a couple, we reference it on our website because we, follow it, and it's, we're part of wanting to achieve that. There's in the last year or two, there's kind of been a newer one, New England, Feeding New England, which is the series every New England state kind of came together, researchers from each state and research and policy folks from each state to really look at how can we get to 30% by 2030. And, which is, we're now in 2025. So it's, coming up fast. And they've done an incredible job at really like breaking out where we are getting our local food from, which is a much harder thing to really quantify than you could ever imagine. So I don't think we could quantify it for Berkshire County, for example, but they were really able to look like statewide and regionally. Vermont, of course, is always ahead. And once again, they're like ahead at figuring out the kind of formula and the resources, which is so
that's a good thing.
Exactly. I love it. So other states can really, begin to adopt kind of the rubric and the formula that they use to figure it out. And so that's going to be a really important tool. They've been in the processes, there's kind of like approach, count, and then they have to be in the process of sort of implementing, like where are the opportunities to really lean into getting more local food to folks in New England. So I think it's really been an important, piece of work that has just come out pretty recently. Yeah.
Ben, I didn't know if you wanted to comment at all.
I would
you don't
say
have to.
No, I find the report super fascinating, especially when you start to look at the numbers and the scale of the challenge that the 30 by 30 is setting out to achieve. And I don't necessarily find it daunting. I think it just is kind of the facts of what it would take to reach that goal. And I think if anything, it just emphasizes to me, why the work BAV and so many other organizations do is so important, because to scale to the level of local food production that aspires to reach is really going to involve an all hands on deck approach. And, from farmers to researchers to service providers, financing, you need all of the pieces to make this work. But yeah, no, I think Vermont, having farmed there and lived and worked there for many years, I think that is a unique community in the sense that it's a small enough state and it's an ag heavy state that has really put a lot of effort into protecting its food shed and understanding what a strong local food shed looks like. And I think it's great to have that in New England, because there's so much happening in every state, but having just those examples to learn from, not that they're going to be a perfect fit for every state, but just it gives a template and it speeds up the adaptation and adoption of these practices and food systems that we need to reach those goals. So I think there's amazing stuff happening in Mass. I mean, I think as we alluded to earlier, like Connecticut is definitely leading, I think, the way forward when it comes to thinking through what DEI looks like in relationship to ag and food system.
Yep.
I mean, I could go on and on, but yeah, every state in the Northeast, I think, kind of is excelling at different parts of it. And it's great to see this 30 by 30 goal at a regional level, because it has to be thought of at a regional level to address these food systems. And a lot of that, we see reflected in our work and our programming. The meat processing one is probably the clearest connection to that, just because, farmers that grow beef in our region aren't just selling in our region. They might be going to New York City, they might be going to Boston, they might be going to other markets. And likewise, a lot of processors that are near us, they're receiving animals from a pretty wide driving distance, depending on the accessibility to processors, depending on where people are farming. So to think that any one state or any one region is like going to do it by themselves is a bit of a fallacy to me. You really have to think at that region-wide scale. And I think that's why that report is it's both humbling and inspiring at the same time.
Yeah, I read it. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of work went into that. So,
oh yeah.
So as an organization, especially a nonprofit, there are things on our list that we can't do for funding reasons but there are things we really need to do or want to do. Are there any things like that, right now that are kind of on that side list that, you want to try to focus on or figure out an innovative way to focus on?
Yeah, I could think of a few.
If you're okay naming them, I'm just curious. You never know.
I think we've really spent the past year trying to figure out where we fit in the farmland access work. And I think we've kind of come to kind of a healthy place, like what's kind of mission aligned, right? Because you don't want to really, and what are other partner organizations doing, and really kind of leaned into that. Yes, we can help navigate farmland access for a farmer to, if land is already identified, to some degree, because between all the business planning that we're doing and grant writing, et cetera, and keeping farmers farming on land is a really important part of farmland access, having open farmland. So I think that's been a really important kind of process for us to go through and figure out where we fit in. Again, as we mentioned earlier, but Land for Good does a lot on succession planning. They do, and transitioning, and they have a farmland finder if you want to go find farmland. American Farmland Trust, obviously they specialize in a lot of conservation, et cetera. And we have other organizations in the Berkshires that also do great work on farmland conservation. We're never going to be a farmland conservation organization. So I think recognizing how we can sort of partner and connect and let everyone kind of do what they sort of do best on this kind of subject has been an important for us. The other thing that comes to mind, because we were just sort of talking about this yesterday, but in a meeting, we do a lot of the technical assistance and, business consulting that we do is really around capacity building. And, and not so much around like hard kind of asset building, like building a website, or, we want to help you with bookkeeping and help you learn bookkeeping and pair you with a bookkeeper, pair you with a financial planner, but we're not in a position to hire someone permanently for you. So that's always a little bit of a tricky line that we have to try to figure out. And sometimes we have some special sources of funding and we can do more in that, lean into that more, and sometimes we can't. But in general, kind of trying to sort of stay in kind of that lane that sort of comes to mind. I guess the last item is, I think we do a lot of advocacy, but we can't lobby. And that's also another interesting line that we have to watch. We care a lot of it. We're not policy experts, right?
Yeah.
So we care, for example, the Healthy Incentives Program, that whole HIP, the kind of conundrum we've been in since December 1st is kind of, I think, a good example of that. Like, how can we reach out to our elected officials, reach out to Beacon Hill and do our part. And yet, So sort of kind of finding that line too. And I don't know, that's what comes to my mind. Ben, how about you?
I guess I would underscore the having other organizations part, at all different levels. And I think sometimes it's good to not be able to do everything. Like, there are so many directions we could go. And I think I've been really inspired in seeing a need for more of the financing work we're doing, like having affordable capital to make things happen, especially as Rebecca mentioned, looking at just like the grants environment at state and federal level. So many are reimbursable, and there are so many farms that would go for this. And if they had the financing and they could tackle it, but if they just, drop all of their cash on hand to go for one grant project, and then they're waiting for 6 to 12 months for an entity to pay them back, that just creates serious business issues that
Yeah.
I hope that we're able to continue growing that part of our business, because I just see how powerful that is. And it's not like taking out a loan or a mortgage, it's like literally just short-term loan to make sure that you can get a project done. And if anything, I think I hope, that we're providing that kind of backup service. So if you're going to take on that big project, you're going to take on that big renovation, whatever it is on the farm, you're not just doing it alone. You're not financing it alone. You've got that support, and you've got a team around you to help think through all the steps and make sure the project gets done on time. Because it can be really scary, even though getting a grant is really rewarding. You're like, yeah, we did it. Then you're like, okay, now we got to build it. And there, and some of these grant deadlines are 6 to 12 months that you have to get things done. I mean, that's really tight turnaround, especially if you're still trying to grow, run the farm, do sales, etc. I think, yeah, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. I mean, there's always other things we want to do more, but I think it's also honing in on what we do best, and we're definitely finding that things like capital or
Yeah.
something that we
No,
do
I
well.
honestly, I absolutely love the financing around those grants that are reimbursable, because I know not even in the farming world, I'm part of a historical society here, and that's what happens. We have to spend the money and then get reimbursed. And our president several years ago used to put in her money, because, and now we're at the point where we don't have to do that. But I used to be like, oh my God, you're writing a check just to cover. And then she's like, oh, but we'll get it back. And I'm like, that's terrible. But to have that for a farmer, that service alone is incredible. So, boy.
And I think it's actually interesting. Like, the other side is that I think the grantors like it too, because they realize that
Yeah.
it's not just the farmer going alone. Like, that
Yep.
farmer has that support or that expertise that they need to accomplish the project. So that gives them more reassurance that the grant funds are being spent as intended. So I actually
Great
think
point.
it helps both sides of the equation.
Great,
Yeah,
great
I
point.
think, where Bev is unique in my experience, I mean, I don't think across the country necessarily, but in our region for sure, is that we are really able to kind of help from A to Z, so that, again, that pairing the farmer with the grant writer, doing that kind of pre-work that you need to do to understand how this is going to impact your business, what you can really afford, et cetera, if you get this grant. And then once they get the grant, being able to do that bridge loan, take them through the whole financing process, and help with project management, which we're able to do at times if necessary. And then again, to the end where you're kind of, when they're paying back the grant, is really something pretty important, I think, for our farmers, and really makes a difference.
Excellent. Ben, I just want to go back to you. So from a soil earth perspective, not that you're going to be greedy here, but like, is there anything that you would want to see happen in the next 10 years in that piece of this organization? How would you
Oh,
want it to evolve? Like, what kind of resources do you need to help your clients?
oh, interesting. I actually feel like we have a lot of the
Rebecca's here,
resources.
so
Yeah, no, it's not like that at all. Yeah, no, I feel very, yeah, I feel very supported in that overall. I actually think what I've seen from the soil health perspective is that there are so many of our partners that are already like leading the way. So I think if anything, I've been more trying to make sure that they're empowered, that whatever they're conducting outreach for, we're getting that to our farmers, if it's state or region wide stuff. So I feel like more when it comes to soil health, just as a primary focus, like I'm just so lucky to have like this huge network of people that are
right.
like, that is like that they wake up and they're just thinking about soil health.
Give
Not
me
that
an
I'm not, and it
example.
undergirds like everything. Oh, like, yeah, I think Kara Roselle at American Farmland Trust, and she's been leading this whole cohort of growers throughout the Northeast. I think it's primarily Maine, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, but I think there's a few other growers outside. But that's just, building one of those peer networks so that farmers are sharing, like, I'm trying this. How did it go on your farm? Let's go look at it at your farm. We'll go look at me trying the same thing on different soil at a different place. That kind of peer-to-peer exchange, coupled with bringing in expertise on biochar or subsoiling, or I know Yukon and the team there has been doing a lot more with trying to train farmers on microscopy and how to do your own soil analysis, at the farm, or
Yep.
you could take your stuff to a lab. So I think it's more for me, for soil health particularly. I think it's more just like I try to have my list of resources that I can pair farmers with. But I mean, I've been doing a lot of climate risk assessments, this past year, and like usually soil is like if someone doesn't have a soil test, I'm like, you need a soil health test. Like we just need to know what we're working with, because
Yeah.
if we don't have that understanding, it's very hard to make a lot of other decisions. And it's related a lot to the business work we do, is like if you don't know where your soil is at and you think you're going to go plant 10,000 chestnut trees, like that's going to be a lot of money thrown after fixing
Yep.
problems that we could have addressed ahead of time. So I think it's more about strategizing based on the farm, where they're at with their own soil health journey, what they're seeing in terms of soil health challenges, and then looking at what tools are available to address those challenges. And it's usually more about bringing a suite of options to the farm, not saying like, my name is Ben Crockett, I've learned it all, here's the best answer. Like that's never the conversation. It's more,
I didn't think so.
yeah. But it's more, okay, I'm hearing that this is the issue. Maybe it's low soil organic matter. Okay, great. What's your soil type? If you don't have a soil test, let's get that. And like, let's look at options that work with your management, your vision for the farm, and how we could be addressing that. But yeah, I mean, it's almost like asking like the fish what the water's like. Like I just feel like if soil health isn't on farmers' minds, like that's usually my first priority. And then yeah, there's a plethora of resources and groups and peer support out there that's growing. So yeah, I feel lucky in that sense. I think I'm usually getting into the little trickier, more obscure things sometimes, like agroforestry or some of the technology that's trying to help farmers address these riskier growing conditions. Or save on labor, because that's like that's a whole other topic. If you have 2 hours, we could go down that rabbit hole, but I think that's where it gets a little more trickier, and where we, again, kind of relating back to our work, we're trying to more structure support around what that farm needs. Not, there isn't like a general, here's a template for how to fix a farm. It's more like, okay,
Yep.
what are the problems you're struggling with, and like let's build a team around that, or let's get you the resources so you can make those decisions.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You guys are doing amazing work, and I am grateful that you're doing this, and I'm sure a lot of people and that you're serving are as well. So let's leave with one question to each of you. Why should someone come to the Berkshires? What is it, and the general area that you're serving? Like, what is it? Why? Like, what would you tell someone?
Like why, as in a farmer or
Yeah.
a tourist?
Or anybody,
As a region, as a part
Anybody.
of anyone, as a part of the country that's very focused on food, agriculture, art, community, from what I can see. So, like, what would you tell someone about? That's what I see from the outside and the times I've visited, but what, being on the inside, seeing, like, what would you communicate to someone about the area and why they should either come visit or potentially reside?
Sure. I mean, I'll jump right in. I'll say, I think compared to where I farmed and we're talking to colleagues in like big ag areas, like Western New York or something like that, I think there is a flexibility and diversity in the Berkshires that creates more opportunities, even if it's a little harder to access land or access the space. I just think there is that little bit of like local interest in the new crop, or that local farm connection, the community connection that agriculture can create, and that, I think, creates its own sort of business opportunity on top of the farming opportunities that exist here. Originally coming from Maine, I mean, I enjoy the hills, I enjoy the diversity of the landscapes. I think the region we cover is really awesome because we go from forests down to prime ag soils on the Hudson Valley side. And yeah, I think there's so many types of landscapes and different growing regions, that if you're a farmer that's like, I don't know exactly what I want to grow, but I kind of want to explore, I think there's a lot to explore here, and there's a lot of opportunities to connect with seasoned farmers and generations of farmers that have kind of seen it all, done it all.
Excellent.
I love that answer. Sorry. Okay, sorry, I'll answer too. I guess I think moving from New York City 14 years ago, to me, I really come to respect the importance of the rural lifestyle and what that really means to folks who are living and working here. So maybe I'll sort of take it from that perspective. And I think farming is such an important part of that rural lifestyle, and that people choose it for a real reason. They're not choosing it to get out of a city. They're choosing it because where they actually want to be, whether they were raised there or not. And I think we've we've sort of lost our way, or forgotten that a lot of farmers are low income folks themselves, and some are on SNAP as well, and that like farming should be a solidly middle class occupation. It could be upper class too. I'd be fine with that too. But like I feel like a lot of the work that we do is kind of, to me, that sort of always sits in the back of my mind, is like, this is like respect for a whole middle class lifestyle that I think like in a rural place, that's what you should be able to have, whether you're farming or doing whatever. I mean, because I think just repeating some of what Ben was saying, but really just the beauty of that landscape, the lifestyle, living in Western Mass during COVID just felt like a real blessing. Like I could go out and walk anywhere, anytime. It didn't have to, and I wasn't stuck in an apartment on an upper floor. I mean, like just felt pretty incredible and like a real gift and a real benefit. And I think that was true for lots of folks. And there's just such an importance to that, to having like a strong education, strong healthcare system, strong farming community, local food, health, like all of that wrapped together is like, just that's why I think people come here.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. This has been, I love what you're doing. So thank you so much. And I appreciate all your feedback and insights.
Great. Thanks so much.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. So I was recently listening to one of the Grounded in Maine podcasts produced by Amy Fagan. The podcast is an open conversation about being mindful about how we show up in the world. It's focused on sustainability and how sustainability impacts every part of our life. What are some of the most important takeaways that people will get from your podcast?
One of the things that I hope that people will take away from the podcast is encouragement. Like I want them to not feel like you have to spend thousands of dollars to be part of the solution, because, there are a lot of sustainable, things that say sustainability or sustainable, like solar panels or organic cotton and stuff like that. Like some things are just more expensive because they have that tagline. That phrase or whatever. But there are so many ways that you can be sustainable. You just have to be a little bit creative. And so I'm putting out all these ideas that what people are doing, just to put the thought out there that we can all be part of it without going broke.
So how can people find your podcast?
My podcast is wherever podcasts are found. It is just called Grounded in Maine. I also have my Instagram is where I am most active, and the Instagram handle is Grounded in Maine Podcasts.